Lori, it's great to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to have this conversation about worthiness and self-worth. I feel like it's something that a lot of us struggle with at some point in our lives, if not all the way through our lives on different levels. So I believe it's a very important conversation to have. Lori, you now help clients reach a place of enoughness and self-worth, and you've been on your own journey with this core wound of not feeling good enough. And you say that your experience has been your greatest teacher and gift. I'd love for you to share with us how you went from feeling so unworthy yourself to the flip side of that, where you now help others see and feel their worth.
hmm Yeah, that was like it was my greatest suffering, but it was my greatest teacher and my greatest gift and my whole life. I mean, I can even go back to when I was a little child, just always not feeling enough and not feeling good enough. And it impacted every area of my life to not going for my dreams and feeling like, oh, I'm not good enough to do that, or comparing myself to others and saying, I'm not as good as them. I'm not there. Um, and just having this shame about not feeling good enough. And the relationships that I have experienced in my life because I didn't feel good enough. And I never felt like I was important enough to share my views and my opinions and just I would stay quiet. I would like, no, I'm not important enough, or my voice is not important enough to be heard. And I remember um it was in my early 20s. And when I do a lot of processes, I always go back to that one. So it has had a big impact on my life. And um I I had a dream. I had a dream about being a personal trainer. And then I woke up and I'm like, I'm gonna be a personal trainer. That's what I want to be. And just it happened that this school in my city had just started. This was the second year of doing a certification for personal training, and so I went and I did it, and I just never felt as good. I never felt I was equal. I never felt I was always comparing, and I'm not as good as them. I'm not there. And I went in and I started personal training, and when I look back at it, I didn't have these awarenesses. I didn't know what I was experiencing. I didn't know I was experiencing um, not feeling good enough and trying to avoid not feeling good enough. And so I stopped doing that, and I got my bachelor of physical education. And so there's just been glimpses in my life where I haven't fully followed through on things because I never felt good enough, is I guess in essence what I'm trying to say. I kind of did a long way around for that one, but where I just haven't followed through on things because I don't feel good enough. And the relationships that I've had because I felt like I was only good enough to put up with those relationships, right? I didn't see my inherent value beyond those. And I truly think life is the coach, and life is there to um, help us evolve and help us grow. And um, it's just so beautiful. It's just so beautiful when we can wake up beyond the stories of our mind of not being good enough or being good enough and wake up to I am beyond good enough. Like there's nothing that could measure my worth or my value. Um, and there's no definition the mind could put on us. It's too limiting for our full brilliance, our full radiance. And when I got that, life started to mirror back to me my inherent worth and my inherent value, and that I did go for my dreams and I did go for my goals, and I did ask for what I wanted and what I needed, and I did um because I knew that I was worthy of all of those things, and life mirrored that back to me. And that's what I want for others, is for them to do this deep, deep inner work so that life can mirror back to them their inherent worth and their inherent value.
Yeah,
And
so
that,
would go ahead, continue.
no, no, that's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I was gonna say, so would you say that it was really a matter of changing your belief system in that essence then?
Yeah. Not only my beliefs about who I was and how I showed up in the world, but um, on all levels of emotionally and somatically. And when you get into identity work, um, it's doing the mental stuff and questioning those beliefs and questioning our fears, but then it's also getting into those other layers of, well, is on the emotional level, somatic level, unconscious level. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, so that's perfect segue into the next question. In the pre-interview, you shared with me that there are two spectrums of worthiness, the egoic worthiness and the spiritual worthiness. So I'd love for you to share with us, the difference between those two, but then also how they are integrated.
hmm yeah, I see it as there's like three levels of worth, and there's the I am good enough and the I am not good enough. And then there's the I am beyond worthy. And the I am not good enough and the I am good enough are both the egoic level. Um, and then the more spiritual level, when our essence embraces our ego to where we wake up beyond those two stories, beyond the ego, beyond the mental level, and we go to I am beyond worthy. I'm I'm like, there's nothing, like, there's the essence that sees everything and accepts everything. And it's like there's our mind that thinks and has the stories of I'm not good enough and I am good enough. And there's gonna be situations where we do feel good enough. But then the pendulum is going to swing to where there's situations where we don't feel good enough. And that pendulum is always going to swing. Um, no wonder we don't feel good enough when we're living in that egoic mind, right? Because the pendulum is always going to swing from, there's times when we're going to feel like, yeah, I'm good enough, I'm great, and then there's times when we're going to feel like, no, I'm not good enough, and it's just going to be this roller coaster ride of riding those emotions and those stories, those beliefs. And but when we wake up to the spiritual level of like, I am beyond all of this. And there's a part of me beyond the egoic mind that accepts everything and sees everything as, you are precious no matter what, right? It's like a little girl that, might do a cartwheel and they're like, yay, look at me, I did a cartwheel. And you're like, yay, that's great. And then they don't do the cartwheel and you're like, yay, that's great. Like nothing can You are perfect, precious, whether you do that cartwheel, whether you don't do that cartwheel. You are precious, whether you lose the weight or you don't lose the weight. You are precious, whether you get the job or you don't get the job. And the essence is, I love the analogy where the essence is just kind of sitting in the seats of the theater, and it's just watching the story of our life, and it's just enjoying it and it's accepting it all, and it's not getting caught up in those stories, right?
Mm. Yeah,
That
there was
would
something
limit
that
us.
there was something that kind of popped into my head as you were saying, really just the essence of really what came through was like abundance, like an abundance essence, that like that beyond worthiness. There's so many layers to this. It's fascinating to me. And I love that how you describe that, it's the mind and it's the thinking, but then there's this, like you say, the spiritual aspect of it. And that's, as you do the work, you kind of peel back the layers further and further until you reach that fullness of it all. Um, Now we also talked about in our other conversation how we perceive our worth and how that can show up differently depending on our personality type, which I find is very fascinating because it's not going to look the same for all of us. And there is a structure that kind of breaks down our different personality types that we can fit into these different categories, for lack of a better word. I'd love for you to share more on that.
Yeah, I use the Enneagram in my coaching, and I really believe we can take like 3 sessions off when we know somebody's personality. And of course, our personality doesn't define us, right? It's not who we are. It's just our personality. And within each personality, within the Enneagram, although the core story of I'm not good enough is still the same of not feeling worthy or not feeling good enough, but the story and the flavor of it within each personality type is going to differ. And so for to kind of ground it and give you some specifics, an Enneagram 1, who's the perfectionist, will be like, I am worthy when I'm perfect. A Enneagram 2, the helper, um, I am worthy when I'm offering value and I'm helping. And if I'm not doing those things, then I don't feel worthy. Or a Enneagram 3, an achiever would be my achievements create that worthiness. I'm worthy when I'm achieving. I'm worthy when I'm successful. My Enneagram 9, or sorry, my Enneagram is the 9. And so for me, my worthiness story is that I'm worthy when there's peace and there's harmony and I'm avoiding conflict. And that's when I'm worthy. And so it'll differ on each personality type, but the main story still rings true is the idea that I'm not worthy or I'm not good enough. But for a 1, it's like I'm good enough when I'm perfect. I'm For a 3, I'm good enough when I'm achieving. For a 1, I'm good enough when I'm helping. For me, I'm good enough when I'm creating peace, harmony, and avoiding and not creating conflict. And then the strategies that we use um, um, to help us avoid not feeling not good enough within those different areas.
So
What are some
how many Enneagram types are there in total?
There's 9. Yeah,
Okay.
there's 9 types. Yeah.
And if someone has never really heard of Enneagram types before, where can they kind of go and learn more about that? What information is required to uncovering that?
Yeah, I mean, you can just Google it, Enneagram 9. I have a book that I use. Sorry.
No, you're good.
And the book is The Wisdom of the Enneagram. And they have a website too. I could give you the link so that people could even just search search that website. But it's a beautiful, beautiful book. And it outlines all of the various enneagrams, what our core fears are, what our core desires are, and what it looks like when we're in our healthy and integrative, and when we're not in our when we're in our like unhealthy, and how those various things show up.
Interesting. I find these types of ways of understanding ourselves so powerful that when we couple it with different healing modalities, it really just gets to kind of take it to that next level. I was actually talking with a woman on another episode about integrating human design into EFT tapping. And so, similarly, understanding more about the personality and what our, like you just described, like what our fears are and what our goals tend to be, depending on what category we fall into. And it's so interesting to see just the subtle differences and the wording change between, working with perhaps someone over here versus someone over here, and how that gets to look. And it is a subtle difference, but it creates such a huge impact, like such a different impact if you just have that little bit extra information. So I do
Mhm.
encourage the listener today, if you don't know your Enneagram type, to go and find out that information, whether you're going to couple it with a healing modality or therapist or not. It's just really great information to have for yourself.
Just the awareness. And when I found out that I was an Enneagram 9, things started to make sense in my life of like, oh, that's why I do the things that I'm doing, right? Because my core fear is separation, abandonment, um and my core desire is peace and harmony and not wanting to avoid conflict. And I'm like, well, now I can see why, I've always had troubles having hard conversations with my husband because I want the peace, the harmony. And I don't want conflict. Or as a 9, they call it a sloth too, where we're very like slothy. And I'm like, and almost like people could see 9s as lazy, and we're not lazy. We're just trying to cultivate that peace and that inner peace and that inner harmony, and the strategies that we use to like to have that, right? And it's
Yeah.
beautiful, but it's also to not identify with our personalities, because we are not our personalities. We are separate from our personalities.
Right. It's a
Um,
part of us, but it's not entirely who we are.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Fantastic. So I'd love to talk about the methodology that you do use in your practice and with your clients. And we talked prior about the 5 levels of change. Can you take us through that on a bit of a microscopic level?
hmm Yeah, I kind of alluded to it in the beginning of our conversation, but the methodology is we have awareness, and then there's acceptance, and then there's aligned action. And within the acceptance, we have 5 levels of change, and we have somatic, emotionally, mentally, behaviorally, and unconsciously. And so, for somatic, for an example, the we can accept using somatic tools and strategies through accepting the sensations within our body, um, through breath work, through different different somatic um, modalities. Mentally, we question our thoughts and we accept our thoughts. I always love using the analogy of the sun. Like we are the sun, and the 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 clouds are like our emotions, our thoughts, and our emotions. They come and go. They pass by the sun. Our sensations, they come and they go. Our thoughts, our feelings, they all come and go, but what stays the same is the sun, right? It just clouds the sun. And when we can bring acceptance to our thoughts, to our emotions, to our sensations, it's like we're parting the clouds to see our fullness, to
Hmm.
see our essence. We are not those. And because we can see them, we are not them. We are prior to our thoughts, to our emotions, to our sensations. And so um, it's through the acceptance on those levels that allows us to take aligned action because we're not butting heads with ourselves. We're not, um, we're accepting what is here right now and we're allowing it, we're embracing it. And then that allows us to like move into an aligned action because we've accepted everything.
Fantastic. Yeah. So rather than resistance, just that fully encompassing all these levels of acceptance. It's beautiful. I love that.
And it's like even if there's resistance, it's like accepting the resistance ironically allows the resistance to soften, right? When we're not judging it or identifying with these things, with our thoughts, with our emotions, with our sensations, with our behaviors. Um, and then unconsciously when we bring the unconscious to the conscious, and then we can work that through all the other levels as well, right? Emotionally, somatically, mentally, when we bring the unconscious to the conscious.
Yeah. And so as you described earlier, obviously there are all these different layers. Um, when we integrate this on a somatic level, we were going to perhaps have you take us through a practice, but I know that there was something that you just wanted to note before we did that, if you were still feeling comfortable to do so.
With somatic work, we had to be really, really careful with somatic because the soma means body and it's the unconscious. And so when we go into somatic tools, we can sometimes bring things up from the body, from the unconscious that we may not be aware of or we may not know of. And so people with big T trauma, it can activate things because we're bringing things out from the unconscious. And so if anyone has big T trauma or if anyone doesn't feel safe to just go through this process, just look after yourself, right? And trust your body. Trust that there is wisdom that is held within us. So if you're feeling resistance, if you're not feeling safe to do it, trust yourself because the body is there just trying to protect us. Um, and we want to just honor that. And before you do somatic um, tools and processes, you always too want to you want to find some safety in the body, somewhere you want to be like, find safety before you do this. Find somewhere in your body that feels safe so that you can go back to that part of you, like that safe part if you experience any um, anything through a somatic process.
Sure. And big T trauma that you mentioned, can you explain that a little bit further, just in case there's anyone who's hearing that for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, there's little T trauma and there's big T trauma. And big T trauma is just, gosh, it's so hard. I know it. I like, and it's like, how do you express it? Um, but these somatic process can just evoke um, trauma within inside ourselves. Um, yeah.
Okay. And so then the next question being, how can we integrate it on a somatic level? Would you like to go through a practice here now? How are you feeling?
Sure, yeah, we can definitely go through it. I would just invite you to just kind of see if there's any part of you that feels constricted or feels activated. The core parts of us is our throat, our heart, and our stomach. Those are kind of like the core areas where we'll feel activation or contraction. And when you find a part inside of you that just feels activated or feels contracted, we're just going to breathe into it, just allowing it to be here, just getting curious and intimate with that part of us. that sensation in our body that feels contracted. And just breathing into the sensation, just fully allowing it to be here. Breathing in to the sensation. We're not thinking about the sensation. We're dropping into the sensation and we're feeling it, breathing into it, allowing it to be exactly as it is. And then we just kind of open the aperture to the walls of the room so that it moves beyond us. And we simultaneously feel that there is something already here that allows it to be here, that allows the sensation in our body to be here. Just breathing in, no agenda, just allowing that sensation in our direct experience to be here. Breathing into it, opening the back of our heart, just allowing, breathing into the sensation. And you should feel it soften as we just presence it and we breathe into it and we allow it. We're not fighting it, we're not trying to get rid of it. Love honors and allows everything. And it should just kind of like soften. How does that feel?
Softer.
And if you did that more, if you just stayed with it and it would just dissolve, right? But when we all these um parts of us and our emotions and our sensations, they just want to be acknowledged, they just want to be presenced, and it's and then they kind of go, they just like, okay, thanks, I've been acknowledged, I've been presenced, and then they move on. And neuroscientists say that it only takes 90 seconds for us to feel an emotion, a sensation. And if it takes longer than that, then we know we're going back into our mind, thinking about it and reactivating that emotion again. But when we fully feel our emotions, when we fully feel those sensations, it literally just takes 90 seconds.
So interesting that you mentioned that too about the mind. I recently had an experience where I was just feeling very frustrated, very hurt, very confused, and it went on for days. And I knew that I was focusing on it in my mind, and I was aware of the thoughts, and I started kind of trying to just close the loop. And when the thoughts would come in, just kind of thanking it for be there, replace and trying to essentially replace it with something positive, and trying almost to avoid focusing on it perhaps. So it's interesting that you mentioned, the thoughts making the emotion stay longer, because I'm not sure if I was really helping myself by doing that or hurting myself. I was really focused more on the thought around the emotion rather than the emotion
Mm.
itself.
Yeah. And when we tend to like, when we're afraid to feel something, we tend to stay locked in our mind, right? And it's a subtle way to avoid feeling it, right? And a lot, I think it goes to like, we think that if we feel it, we're never going to get out of it, right? Like we're afraid, like it's like we're just going to be in it always. But when we fully feel it, it takes 90 seconds for it to just move through our body. And maybe, people haven't learned the right tools or strategies to navigate the feelings and the sensations in our body. And so it's good to know that when you're thinking about it, you're actually stuck with it because the mental activity doesn't allow the energy to move through. Um, I loved my mentor where she was like, they speak different dialects. You can almost like think of it that way. Like our feelings speak French and our thoughts speak English, right? And they just two different dialects. And so, you think if I think about my feeling and it's like, no, they're on two separate um railway tracks, right? And so we can't think through our feelings. We have to actually feel the feelings. Yeah.
No, that's very well said. I appreciate that. That the train tracks is such a great analogy. And thank you for taking us through that practice and that tool. It's just a really great thing that someone can, take away from and continue to practice on their own.
Hmm.
Which is what we're all about here, is really just providing tools and strategies to help you move through these big sticky emotions.
Yeah, and it's just one level, right, to help integrate this stuff. And so if you're telling yourself stories about not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, and then they activate those sensations just by going in and just really getting intimate with that sensation. And and I always ask too the question when people are going through that, is it okay for that sensation to be here? Is it allowed? Because when we allow it, it just moves through, and it's one way to integrate the feeling of not feeling good enough in our body. Um, and then um, and then take actions towards your goals, right? Once you feel the sensation. This one, it doesn't, somebody is afraid of being seen, maybe it's they're going to go up and do a talk, and they're feeling really nervous and they're not feeling good enough. And it could just be finding the sensation in the body. Um, like where is this being activated in my body? Where am I noticing this in my body? And then asking yourself, can I be with this sensation right now? Is it okay for it to be here? And then do that somatic process where we just breathe into it, we allow it. And then that's one way to help us once we integrate it. We could question our thoughts, but it just helps us take action towards our goals.
Yeah,
If
so
that
I'm
makes
wondering.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And it almost kind of covers the next question, but I'm just going to ask it just to see if anything else kind of comes to mind. There is kind of a second part here that I think does take us in a bit of a different direction. And the question is just, how do we embrace the feeling of worthiness, and what's the misconception around that?
Hmm. Yeah. And I think it's embracing it and on all five levels where we embrace the feelings, whether it's shame, guilt, whatever the feelings are around it, where we allow and we embrace those feelings, um, where we question our thoughts about not being good enough and our beliefs that have us believing that we are not good enough, right? Somewhere along the line, we bought into the misunderstanding that we're not good enough. And it's questioning those beliefs and questioning those thoughts and fears and somatically allowing and embracing those sensations in our body. Um, it's so beautiful. It's so profound. This work is so powerful. It's so profound. And I think a misconception is that we have to heal it. It's something that we need to heal. And feeling worthiness, unworthiness, we don't heal it. There's nothing to fix. We are not broken. It's our perception that is broken. It's us thinking and feeling and that we are not good enough. But there is nothing to fix. There we aren't broken. And um yeah. it's just parting those clouds, right? Those emotional clouds, those thought clouds, those sensation clouds, those unconscious clouds, those behavioral clouds, um, for us to see our wholeness, for us to see that we are beyond any stories that we tell ourselves.
Mm,
Um, yeah, and we've just innocently bought into those, right?
yeah. Fantastic. That was very well said. I really appreciate your, just your energy is so calming. It's such a beautiful experience to just sit here and have you take us through that practice and have this conversation with you. And yeah, I really just appreciate your the space that you hold and just the energy, like I say, that you have brought to this conversation. It's really fantastic. Now you have a very generous offer for my audience, and I appreciate this a lot. You were wanting to do a complimentary clarity call for anyone that might be interested in exploring this work a little bit further. That's so generous of you. Thank you so much. You also have a free worksheet and a group program starting up. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm excited for this group program because my I love the deep inner work. Like that's my zone of genius. That's where I shine. And I remember going through my coaching certification and the first 6 months was all deep inner work, right? Like it was like we got to the depths and we like it was like let the unraveling begin, right? And then we got into the last 6 months with like strategy. And I'm like, no, I want to go back to this, the deep work, right? Like, let's just stay in this deep inner work and let's just forget about the strategy. And um, if people are really wanting to create that inner peace and that inner freedom and feeling just at peace with themselves and it's gonna be a beautiful, beautiful group program, and when I talked about, like, the parting of the clouds, that's when we're gonna get into the deep inner work, the deep emotional work, somatic work, mental work, unconscious work to part those clouds that have where we've bought into the misunderstanding that we're not good enough. And, each week will just layer on each other, um, and just help us to feel good enough and feel worthy, both on the essence level and the egoic level.
And who is this for specifically? What kind of person are you calling into this space?
That's where I struggle is because this work is for anyone. This work is for anyone that has any. I mean, it could 98% of the population could benefit from doing worth work. Um, so it's, maybe they want to cultivate confidence in dating, or they want to they want to, they find that they're always going into toxic relationship after toxic relationship, or maybe they're playing small, maybe they have self-doubt. Um, Maybe they aren't going for their dreams and their desires because they don't feel worthy of them. Maybe they, before I went really in depth to the worthiness work, I worked with women who were wanting to lose weight. And what I found working with them is that a lot of them had the core misunderstanding that they weren't good enough or they didn't feel worthy of their weight loss goal. And when we can have the best strategies, the best efforts, but if we don't believe we deserve it or we don't believe we're worthy of it, we're only going to allow ourselves to get so far. We have these emotional set points. We have these where we're only going to allow ourselves to get so far, and then we're going to bring ourselves back down to like the level that we feel worthy or we feel good enough. um I'm trying to think of other um, maybe for me, this started to really come to fruition when I had my girls, when my twin girls were born, and it was like I never felt good enough. I didn't feel like a good enough mom. I didn't feel like a good enough partner. I didn't feel like, um, and I was always comparing myself to other moms. I remember this one lady who had a YouTube channel. She had twins, and her house was like perfect, and she had these perfect children, and she did all these perfect things, and I'm like, I was trying to like be that, right? And overcompensating. It's like I'm not good enough. I'm not like that mom. I'm not um and it 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 just leads to suffering. And when we're when we just don't feel like we're good enough. I
Yeah,
hope that explained it.
yeah. No, absolutely. The constant, self-criticism and comparing and just that feeling. It's a feeling. So if people are trying to break away from that feeling, if for lack of a better word, then this is for them. That's fantastic.
Mhm.
So if people want to find out more about your program, perhaps reach you for the complimentary clarity call that you're so generously offering, or take a look at your worksheet, where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram, Lori, Lori dot Cunningham, Cunningham dot 148. And my business name is a space for her.
Fantastic. And any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, thank you. This was so beautiful.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your openness. Like I said, your energy, it's so calming and it's so beautiful to just sit here and have a conversation with you and for taking us through not only your wisdom and insights, but also through that practice as a tool that people can take away from this episode. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.